Hello ladies and gentlemen, happy to have you, and welcome back to another inconsistently uploaded dissection of our favorite pirate manga. I know what many of you may be thinking. April 1st, is this a prank video? Should I unsubscribe? No and no. Although I originally did plan to do something funny for today, I did not plan for chapter 1044 to be as game-changing as it was. As of this chapter, a whole lot of theories have been turned on their heads and a whole new world of theories has simultaneously opened up. Questions of gods, devil fruits, destiny, and prophecy, themes of laughter, liberation, and imagination, with none other than Monkey D. Luffy at the center of it all, and more so the person I talked about in length on this channel's very first video. This is the Hidden Island Jazz Lounge, and today we'll be talking once again about Joy Boy. Where do we begin with this one? I guess I'll start with the big news. Luffy is Joy Boy, kind of. You see, Luffy's devil fruit is not actually the gum fruit, but instead it's a Zoan type, the mythical human fruit model Nika, as in sun god Nika, as in boy oh boy am I going to be reevaluating the shit out of my devil fruit theory. After all these years, Luffy finally achieved Gear 5th, and I don't think it's what anybody expected. The flaming hair, the belt of smoke, the non-stop laughter, and we see the spitting image of the 800-year-old Man of Mystery. A conversation between the Gorosei confirms it. Luffy's devil fruit is quite special indeed. At the max of its capabilities, the gum fruit allows the user to become the sun god himself, and with Zunisha's revelation that Luffy is Joy Boy, we also finally get confirmation that Joy Boy and Nika are one and the same, and Luffy is the inheritor of not only Joy Boy's title, but his power as well. While in Gear 5th, utilizing the full power of the Nika fruit, Luffy acquires the ability to manipulate his body freely, as well as the things he comes in contact with. But it's not as simple as rubberizing his environment. Instead, Luffy essentially becomes an exaggerated cartoon character. Laughing constantly and jumping around with a heartbeat of rhythmic drums, he can blow up his muscles like Popeye the Sailor and bends the environment around him in absolute defiance of the laws of physics. His eyes even pop out of his head like a Looney Tune, and his cartoonish influence seems to apply to those he's fighting as well. When he slams Kaido around like a Flintstones character, we can see the same effect applied to Kaido with the eyes and even some comically large bumps on his head, complete with the spinning stars and all. In other words, Luffy in this form is primarily inspired by the various eras of classical animation, especially the earliest types from back in the American 1920s, ironically also known as rubber hose animation, named such because of the characteristic rubber hose or noodle-like limbs lacking joints that bend for the sake of simplicity. We can see this kind of art style present throughout One Piece as well, since Oda likes to use it a lot when drawing Luffy. We see it in Nika's silhouette when first mentioned by Who's Who, and we see it again when Luffy makes a return as Joy Boy. Leave it to Oda to go that far when making a connection. What's cool about this ability is that it seems to be brought to its fullest potential based on the user's imagination or creativity in some way. As the Gorosei explain, the user can fight in whichever way they fancy. I know that there have been some misconceptions due to the scanlation specifically using the word imagination to describe this, but let me defend this point for a second. I'm not using the word imagination here to suggest that Luffy can pull guns out of his jacket like the Mask, or him being able to straight up warp the reality around him. I'm using it to describe how Luffy continuously finds new and imaginative ways to use an otherwise simple ability. When it comes to imagination, Luffy takes the cake. From the beginning of the story, Luffy has always been a light-hearted, free-minded adventure seeker who brought humor and ridiculous antics to even the most serious of situations, and this is usually played up using his rubbery characteristics. When looking at most characters in shonen manga, you'll find a lot of them tend to use things like swords or energy blasts or martial arts when they're fighting, but next to all of them, Luffy and the power of rubber stand out as somewhat plain, almost limited in a way. Someone who has no idea about what One Piece is may hear about Luffy's rubber abilities and think something along the lines of, well, how much could he possibly do with that? I know because at one point that guy was me, and despite that, Luffy has the most creative and versatile applications of a single superpower I've seen in any series. He has the most named attacks in One Piece, and an endless number of ways he chooses to use his power. As a character, he is written in such a way that he has the mental freedom and creativity necessary to make rubber interesting, and it doesn't stop with his personality. As I've spoken about before, Luffy is the greatest liberator in the story, bringing joy wherever he goes, those and freeing those around him from their literal and figurative prisons. These are his themes as much as they are of Joy Boy or Nika, and now it comes together since they're all essentially the same. In other words, from his power to his personality to his actions, every aspect of Luffy's character embodies freedom, and there's nothing freer than the imagination. And now we have the added knowledge that the Gum Gum fruit is actually the mythical Nika zone, a fruit of a god known as the Warrior of Liberation. This fruit's ability, while having rubber properties, is more accurately described as the power of freedom. It makes sense when you think about it. Cartoons and the worlds they inhabit are truly free. An animator can make anything they want happen on the page. Physics, limitations, and logic do not apply as they would in our world, and by the same token, Oda has that level of freedom when making his story. Like all other animators and cartoon artists, he wants to entertain you and bring you enjoyment. He wanted Luffy to be a fun, uplifting character, and so he was. And Luffy wanted to be the freest man in the world, and so now he is. The only limits were both Oda and Luffy's imaginations. With this ability, Luffy can manipulate himself however he pleases, so that not even his body can contain him. Size, strength, speed, fatigue, and even the ground he walks on can no longer limit what he's capable of. For the most part, if he can think it, he can do it. What this does, though, is really bring into perspective what he was doing throughout the story up until now. We've kinda always suspended our disbelief and accepted the feats he's accomplished as an extension of his rubbery body, and sure, that's part of it, but when we look back at things like him blowing into his thumb to make his arm bigger, or spinning his legs like a tornado, it almost seems glaringly obvious now that there was more than meets the eye, and yet we brushed it off as a metaphorical cartoon power rather than a literal one. I didn't question enough how or why Luffy could completely change forms and alter the trajectory of his punches mid-air. What about how he seemingly generated extra arms out of nowhere for his Kong organ move, or how he could retract his legs into themselves like pistons and take off flying like Astro Boy? It was all right there in front of us for so many years, and in retrospect it all makes a lot more sense. Even the idea of Luffy being a zone type lines up with what we've seen. Let's compare him to another user of the human fruit, Chopper. No matter what form, whether it's his zone form or his default state, Chopper always retains the base quality of his fruit, which is to have the brain power and cognitive capabilities of a human being. In the same vein, no matter what state Luffy is in, he always retains the rubbery body that was possessed by Nika, so for all intents and purposes, he is still a rubber man, but things start becoming more interesting when we are introduced to his fourth gear. This is the first time we see Luffy undergo an actual transformation that affects not only his physical capabilities, but his style of attack and his appearance as well. Being that this is the only power-up that precedes his final transformation into Gear 5th, or his true zone form, it's safe to say that Luffy's Gear 4th is actually his hybrid form, the bridge between his normal state and his fully transformed state. If we take a look once again at Chopper, he has a lot of different shapes he can take in his hybrid form, and in a similar way, Luffy has variations on his Gear 4th transformation. To lend even more credence to the hybrid idea, elements from Gear 4 can be seen represented in Gear 5. In 4, Luffy's hair begins to float upward in an almost fire-like manner, and then in 5 his hair becomes fire completely. Let's not forget the hockey patterns that form on Luffy's body in Gear 4 that are reminiscent of flames themselves. The belt of steam that circles his body is a reference to that of various gods and deities in Asian culture, and he retains this quality when having fully transformed into the likeness of an actual god. Even Hyogoro immediately noted these similarities, liking Gear 4th Luffy to a guardian deity. We don't see other Paramecia users transform in this direct way elsewhere in the story, so it lines up with what we know about how zone fruits function. And it also changes the nature of some of Luffy's biggest fights. For example, Luffy vs. Enel was actually a fight between a real god and a false god. Lucci was always meant to mirror Luffy, but now their battle gains even more depth as a fight between two zone users. It's funny to me that he was so set on capturing Robin, while the actual greatest threat to the world government's agenda was staring him and punching him right in the face. Plus, all the warlords that Luffy fought up until now are named after animals, and the story is coming to a head with a battle between two mythical zones. And in this very fight, Luffy's new Conqueror's Haki moves such as Red Rock and Hydra share the names of mythical creatures. But like with all mythical zones, there's always an added ability or two that come with the transformation, and the sun god part of Luffy's fruit may have been responsible for things such as the fire that comes with his red hawk. If imagination is part of the key to Luffy expanding his moveset, then is it possible that Red Hawk came about because Luffy was thinking about his late brother Ace? Did Snake Man come about because of his friendship with Boa? There are times where Luffy seems to be making things up as he goes, and if so, they have to have been inspired by something, right? And luckily for our protagonist, inspiration and imagination are seemingly the main driving force behind this devil fruit, and it culminates in Gear 5th, where there are no longer things holding Luffy back. Now that we know for sure that gods of old have mythical devil fruits of their own, it begs the question, are there more like this one? Sengoku, former fleet admiral of the Marines, had one himself, the mythical human fruit model Buddha. We still don't know what the extent of his abilities are, but if there's anything he may have inherited from his Buddha fruit, it would have to have been wisdom. Sengoku is known for being a legendary strategist. His intelligence is second to none, and because this was shown back in Marineford, it's a safe bet that Oda had these God Zone ideas planned out for quite a while. There may be more than we even realize, as any fruit we've seen up until now could have been renamed and reclassified by the world government in order to hide their true identities. But if so, a question I keep asking myself is who else might have one? In my book, the two biggest candidates are Marshall D. Teach and Monkey D. Dragon. Teach has been noted to have a strange body and possesses atypical habits and behaviors. Not only that, but the first devil fruit he acquires on page is supposedly a Logia, however it does not allow him to transform into his respective element. His powers of darkness somehow also include gravitational powers and additionally cancel out other devil fruit powers on contact. For a man like Teach, who knows his history so well, to seek out this specific fruit above all others sets off some serious alarms in my head. In general, Teach seems to break a lot of the established rules around devil fruits, and a secret behind his signature devil fruit could be the reason. Is it possible that the Yami Yami no Mi was also reclassified to a Logia at some point, when in actuality it's a mythical zone of another godlike being? If some fan theories are correct, and Teach is aiming to possess one of each devil fruit type, then that would mean his missing third fruit would have to be a Logia rather than a zone. Interesting to think about if you consider that Luffy's devil fruit arguably covers all three types itself. Its rubber qualities are like a Paramecia, the fire it can generate is like a Logia, and it has the transformative capabilities of a zone. Maybe Blackbeard and Luffy are more equally matched than it would seem at first. And what about Dragon? We have no idea what his actual abilities are, or even if he has a devil fruit, but I'm strongly leaning towards the idea that he does. His introduction in Logtown has been spoken about in the community plenty of times, but I'd like to add a piece to the discussion. It's heavily implied that Dragon has some sort of command over the weather. He is likely the reason a bolt of lightning struck the execution stand and saved Luffy, and likely also the reason for the storm that blew through town, giving Luffy a clean escape. Luffy wasn't simply being lucky here. He was actively being helped by his father. So, let me propose an idea. What if Dragon's devil fruit is the human fruit model Uranus, the same name belonging to the third and most mysterious ancient weapon? We know that Shirahoshi is Poseidon, and we have good reason to believe that Pluton is a ship of some sort. Poseidon is the name of the Greek god of the ocean, and thus Shirahoshi resides at the bottom of the sea. Pluton is the name of the Roman god of the underworld and the deep earth, and we first learn about Pluton in a tomb underground. It was built on an island, Water 7, and is possibly buried somewhere, thus its name. And in that same vein, Uranus is the name of the Roman god of the sky. So consider this. If the ancient weapons possess the names of real gods, then it's plausible that one of those gods' powers may also currently be hidden within a devil fruit. And what better power for the god of the sky to possess than command over the weather itself? In fact, that is a supremely dangerous power to have, as one could use it to create natural disasters and wipe cities off the map, a common theme with the ancient weapons. If Dragon were to have eaten such a devil fruit, the third ancient weapon, then it's no surprise he's considered the world's worst criminal. His second in command, Sabo, only has a bounty of a measly 600 million berries, indicating he's not so much of a priority to the world government by comparison. But Dragon is somehow the worst criminal. He hasn't really done much of note so far, at least on page, but if he were to have the Uranus fruit, he wouldn't have to do a thing to be placed at the top of every world government hit list. This may be the reason why we've learned absolutely nothing about this weapon aside from its name, and also why we haven't learned much about Dragon up until now. They're covering it up. How many other gods and deities are on the table now? Kuma is seen reading a Bible. Are there angel and devil zones somewhere out there too? Are there others like Nika? Some gods are mentioned back in the Skypiea arc alongside the sun god. Was Ryuma, the sword god, among them? Or how about Imu? Is Imu the last living god left from the Blank Century? We've gotten so many answers and are left with so many more questions, but for now I want to take a moment to put the fun possibilities aside and talk about the most pressing question here. A big concern for many One Piece fans has always been that Luffy's adventure was destined to happen, that it was always preordained that he would become the Pirate King, and nothing he had accomplished up till now was a result of his effort, but rather just fate playing its course. In chapter 1044, we learn that Zoans have a will of their own, an idea that I posited more generally in my Devil Fruit theory, which you should watch if you haven't already. We also learned that the Nika fruit has evaded the world government for centuries, but what does this mean? Did the Devil Fruit get up and walk around on its own to avoid falling into the wrong hands? Does it choose its user? Is Luffy's tale yet another story about a chosen one? Yes and no. I'm not part of the camp that thinks the Gum Gum fruit went missing for 800 years, only to show up now. My guess is that there have been other people who've used the fruit. However, I think that they lack the imagination and desire for freedom necessary to bring the fruit to its full potential, and so there were probably multiple Gum Gum users over the years who died thinking their power was that of rubber, and thus it flew under the radar for so long. As we know, when a Devil Fruit user dies, their power respawns elsewhere in another fruit, but if certain fruits have wills of their own, what if they could choose where they pop up again? It's possible that this is the mechanism by which the Gum Gum fruit has evaded the government all this time. It's clearly not immune to capture, as Who's Who managed to get a hold of it before it was stolen and ultimately eaten by its next user. Interestingly, Devil Fruits always seem to suit their user quite well, as complementary to their personality and nature, so it doesn't seem like such a crazy idea to me that Devil Fruits to some degree are drawn towards those who would make the best fit. So maybe the fruit was drawn to Luffy. Maybe Luffy was drawn to the fruit. What I'm trying to say is that yes, to some degree Luffy was chosen. Someone or something chose him to inherit this power, but he was not always the chosen one per se. Ultimately, Luffy was the one who picked up the fruit and ate it. I think Luffy achieved his heights through his own merit and not because of the fruit's power or destiny. He could have just as easily failed if he had not had the support of his friends. It was Luffy as a person who brought the Devil Fruit to its full potential, not the other way around. I like to think of this scenario as a modern adaptation of a very old Arthurian tale. The Sword in the Stone is a novel written in the early 20th century which tells the origin story of King Arthur, and it goes a little like this. A young orphan boy, referred to as Wart, is adopted and raised by a knight in a castle. Wart is being trained as a knight as well, however he can't actually become one due to his commoner blood. While on a small quest, Wart finds himself lost in a forest where he meets and befriends a wizard named Merlin who can see the future. And together, Merlin and Wart return to the castle where the wizard decides to become his new teacher. Merlin uses his magic powers to turn Wart into various animals and shows him how the other beings of the world live, and in the process, Wart makes friends with all the various creatures of the forest. On the day that Wart's master is ready to be knighted, he orders Wart to go retrieve his sword for him from home, but the door is locked and Wart can't get it from inside, so he looks around and sees another sword on a hill, stuck on top of a rock. When he touches the sword, he feels an incredible power coming from it, but can't pull it out. He keeps trying and trying, and it is then that the voices of all his newfound animal friends in the forest encourage him and support him, and with revitalized confidence he successfully pulls the sword from the stone. That sword happened to be Excalibur, a test of sorts meant to determine who is worthy to become the next king, and Merlin reveals to him that Wart's real name is Arthur, the long-lost prince of the kingdom. Arthur is crowned as the new king, and he is showered with gifts from his newfound friends. The point I'm trying to make here is that Arthur couldn't pull the sword simply because of his royal blood. He actually failed his first few attempts, but it was his good nature and the support of his friends that gave him the confidence to come into his own as the rightful heir. So I'd like to think of the Gum Gum fruit and the inheritance of Joy Boy's will as the sword in the stone waiting for its rightful successor to show up. Arthur couldn't have pulled that sword if not for his comrades, and likewise, Luffy's journey to becoming Joy Boy was only possible because of those around him. Mihawk said it himself, Luffy's most dangerous power is his ability to make allies everywhere he goes. That's not a result of his devil fruit, but rather who he is as a person. And as Merlin guided and shaped Arthur into his rightful role as king, maybe someone did the same for Luffy. Someone who saw what kind of person Luffy really was. A person who defends his friends, idealizes freedom, and shares the dreams of a certain pirate king. Maybe Shanks saving Luffy from a sea king was Luffy being chosen. Not by fate, not by a devil fruit, but by peers and by merit. After all, Shanks claims he made a bet on the next generation. Perhaps letting the Gum Gum fruit remain with Luffy was Shanks betting on who would make the best Joy Boy. Through Luffy's virtue, Shanks found the one who could pull the metaphorical sword from the stone. I have a theory regarding this that I'd like to go into detail on, but it'll take some time to cover everything, so in the next video I will be talking about Shanks and what I think this chapter has implied regarding his true role in the story. Think of it as a part 2 to this video. Oh, and make sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already, that way you can easily tune in with me next time. And to close it out, I want to sincerely thank you once again for landing on the Hidden Island. We hope you've enjoyed the show because we sure enjoyed putting it on. And until next time, have a beautiful day, a pleasant night, and a wonderful romance dawn.